we have a little bit of everything. We have speakers, we have keynoters, and food. And we also have entertainment. One of the things we like to do when we have activities like this is we like to highlight the talents of our students. And so we have a number of programs and activities, spoken word, dance, and I'm sure that you will enjoy that. 25 years, to me, when you talk about reflecting on 25 years, I think it's important to realize that you're reflecting on what's been accomplished. And we've been able to do that with the help of a lot of people, collaborations, folks who have really, really helped her. We really believe in the collaboration. I also would like to recognize, since they had such a big celebration recently, and that's Pat and Jerry Gurn. Wave, come on, Pat. I think they called themselves, they had a big celebration. Jerry was celebrating his 90th year, and Pat is celebrating her 80th. And so these are, if you're looking for role models, these are individuals who have stayed the course. And one of the things I always tell students is that it's not so much what you do while you're a student. You can be all kind of a hellraiser when you're a student. It's probably no consequence. But the real test is what you do 10 years from now, 15 years from now, and how committed do you still remain to social justice, inclusiveness, and diversity in general. And so I was down in Detroit last week, and there were students there, and it's really quite a contrast because some are still actively involved in activities. Others kind of like, well, they change on you, and they get very formal. You know, the same student that used to say what it is now is to whom are you speaking. They used to be called Hank is Henry now. So they do change. So, you know, with the students who are here today, just remember that the commitment to justice, inclusiveness is a lifelong commitment. And you can't afford to drop in and drop out, because if you drop out, then there's a question, how serious were you in the first place? So before Katrina, and let me also thank the staff for all of this work. We've been successful because of the energy, the focus and commitment of staff, their ability to be creative with programs and activities. And so those who are going to be here for the next 25 years, good luck, because you will be judged on the next 25 years. I noticed that my picture is over there, and there was a daily article that said the university will be judged by promise, not by promises made, but by promises kept. And I think all of us who are committed in this, all of us who really worked, and this is really hard work, we are to commend ourselves that we have kept a lot of our promises that were made to the students. Students had a reason for what they had to do back in 1989, 1970, the early 70s, 71, and the mid 80s, which we often sometimes call the stealth BAM movement. But each group accomplished something, and they could have been doing a lot of other things. Some of the students made major sacrifices to move things forward. I always think about the Tower students who spent 6 weeks upstairs. No one guessed, I can tell you administratively, that those students were stay up there for 6 weeks, but they were extremely committed, and they got changes in action as a result of that. So enjoy yourself today. have a good time, and we hope to have you back here in 25 years. I guess now we have to do it in increments of five years. So thank you. Give me a program. I still think someone took my notes. Had them 5 minutes ago. Anyway, to start the program off, before we have Damon Williams as our keynoter and our panel with Denise and Andrew. To start this off with the program, we're going to have Rayonna Mashawn Andrews. And she's a student, undergraduate student in the literature, sciences, and art.
So this poem I wrote is called The Shade of Blue. There have been places in time where I thought I'd never find something so true. I've been waiting in lines colored the usual binary, black and white. But the grass is greener on the other side. So green it looks blue. And the blue looks pinker, or maybe it's just me. I'm starting to become colorblind. See, color in my mind always assured status. These poor habits always crept up in time. Oh, am I breaking color lines? I saw whites helping fight for my rights. And an Indian, you know, the real ones from South Asian, not the natives or Arabs. Did you know the population that has the most Muslims is Afghanistan? That has nothing to do with an Arab man in Middle Eastern land. And the population in America is African American. If I never came across the color blue, I'd probably be race guessing like the rest of them. Outsiders who only know racial dividers, but I know a place where no other racial backgrounds are acquired. That's why for me it's not just go blue, but it's go black, and it's go multiracial, Native and Latino, and it's go Asian and Haitian too. Now look at the color line and tell me what's dividing you. Add and multiply multicultural facts, subtract racism, and OAMI's all that. No need for Grammys or an image award. Just look at your reflection. The image is yours. How will you partake in this diversity score? Thank you.
I have the distinct honor of introducing my brother from another mother. And the biography of all of our speakers and panelists are included in your packet today, so I'm going to kind of jump around. And I'll end with some personal notes here, but it'll be very brief. But Dr. Damon Williams is a scholar, administrator, and educator, passionate about making organizations inclusive and excellent for all of us, creating equitable educational outcomes, and activating learning, youth development, and leadership in ways that are transformative and inspiring of new possibilities. He currently is the Vice Chancellor, Vice Provost, and Chief Diversity Officer, and a member of the Educational Leadership and Policy Analysis faculty at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, where he is the founding leader of the Division of Diversity, Equity, and Educational Achievement. One of the key aspects of his portfolio is the First Wave program, and I thought I'd highlight that because it is phenomenal. And it really hones in to some of the arts that we saw here today, spoken word, and really a focus on integrating hip hop with our existing pedagogies. He is widely considered one of the nation's most dynamic and innovative leaders in the areas of diversity and inclusion management, and he recently won the 2013 National Association of Diversity Officers in Higher Education's Inclusive Excellence Award for Leadership. Let's give him a hand for that. Yeah. He is also a prolific author and national speaker, and his most recent books were released as a companion volume, the Diversity Leadership Set. And these books really offer guidance to leaders interested in the most cutting-edge insights into leading diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts. The first book is titled Strategic Diversity Leadership, Activating Change and Transformation in Higher Education. And the second book, which I co-authored with Damon, is known as the Chief Diversity Officer, Strategy, Structure, and Change Management. That truly was a labor of love over 5 years, right? And he is one of our own. He received his PhD from the University of Michigan Center for the Study of Higher and Post-Secondary Education, where his focus was organizational behavior and management. And I know personally that Michigan holds a dear spot in his heart, and he is so happy and thrilled to be with us as we are to have him. I am so happy again. I see him as a brother. We worked very closely together over the last 15 years. And I'll never forget when I first met Damon. Damon is the type of individual, if he wants something, if he wants to know someone, he's going to make that happen. He's going to push forward and get it done. So he walks into my office, plops down into this nice fluffy chair that I have in there, and he says, "Who are you and what do you do?" So I'm like, oh, okay, who is this crazy guy just walked into my office? But we had a very cultivating discussion, and we've been fast friends ever since. And I knew that Damon possessed some very special qualities when we, as first and second year graduate students, he pulled me aside and he said, "You know what, Trina, there's this summer project that I think we should go after." And I'm thinking, okay, it's something campus-wide, maybe even regional. And I said, "So what is it, Damon?" He said, "You know, there's this project that's being run out of the city of Detroit, and it's funded by a state grant for $2 million, and it was focused on assessing early educational interventions for children in the Detroit area." And I said, "Okay, so what? How do you want me to interface with that?" And he says, "I think we should evaluate that over the summer." So being a first-year graduate student, I said, "Are you serious?" And after I gave him the "Are you crazy" look, and after he competed for and got the grant, and we worked together to develop appropriate methodologies. Denise was even helped out, and several other graduate students like Heather Wathington helped out on the back end of getting that report together. But his ability to put together a cadre of undergraduate, graduate students and go for an effort like that as a first-year graduate student at Michigan. So that was the kind of foundational aspect of our work together over these last 15 years, and I am so delighted to have him here today. So join me in welcoming my colleague and dear friend, Dr. Damon Williams.
Now let me see if I can get this tech back in order. All right. It's so good to be here today. I'm so thankful and humbled by the opportunity to be home. I do consider myself to be a Michigan man, whatever the heck that means. And I'm always pleased to be back in the great state of Michigan, and more importantly, to be at the University of Michigan. No more important and I think significant of an opportunity than to acknowledge 25 years of diversity and excellence, the leadership of the men and women who've worked in the Office of Academic Multicultural Initiatives. Yes, give it up. Before I move into my remarks, I would like to ask all of you if you might join me in a bowed moment of silence in acknowledgement of the tragedy for those lost yesterday in Boston. While the facts of what happened yesterday will unfold in the days, months, and years ahead, what cannot be missed is how yesterday's events, I think, echo how important the work is that we do around issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion. The work that we do each and every day preparing students for this world that we live in today, doing the research that we do about the world that we live in today, all of the things that sit at the core of what it means to be a great research university in the 21st century. As I was preparing myself for today's remarks and thinking about what it was that I would talk about and what types of insights I might provide, I found myself continually going back to my own experience in the Office of Academic Multicultural Initiatives and my own experience at the University of Michigan. And it's so out of that context that I'm going to share and give some perspective today for these opening remarks for today's celebration. All I really need to know I learned in kindergarten by Robert Fogum was what sat nearest to my mind and my heart as I thought about this. Most of what I really need to know about how to live and what to do and how to be, I learned in kindergarten. Wisdom was not at the top of the graduate school mountain, but there in the sand pile at Sunday school. These are the things I learned. Share everything, play fair, don't hit. Put things back where you found them. Clean up your own mess. Don't take things that aren't yours. Say you're sorry when you hurt somebody. Wash your hands before you eat. Never forget to flush. Warm cookies and milk and cold milk are good for you. Live the balanced life. Learn some and think some and draw and paint and sing and dance and play and work every day, some. Take a nap every afternoon. When you go out into the world, watch out for traffic, hold hands and stick together. Be aware of wonder. Everything you need to know in life encapsulated in that very simple poem. And as I thought about issues of diversity and excellence, what I came to understand is that everything I needed to know about diversity and excellence, I learned in the Office of Academic Multicultural Initiatives, and I learned at the University of Michigan. That little kid that's sitting there with his hands like this, that was me when I showed up at John's doorstep as a precocious first-year doctoral student. Not only on John's doorstep, but also on Nick Collins' doorstep, also on James Jackson's doorstep, also on Henry Mears' doorstep, and probably some other doorsteps that I have not mentioned and named. I was so excited to be here. I had received a wondrous Rackham Merit Fellowship, the fellowship that made all things possible for young people who came from the type of background that I did. A background of possibility, but also a background of economic vulnerability. A background that was urban, but yet at the same time very elite. And this was the experience I brought from Miami University. A 24-year-old doctoral student showing up at the doorsteps of the hallowed halls of the University of Michigan, the Center for the Study of Higher and Post-Secondary Education, knocking on the door of the Office of Academic Multicultural Initiatives in John Matlock, trying to see what was what, where was where, and how could I get down. So much in the name, the Office of Academic Multicultural Initiatives. Not the Office of Equity, not the Office of Diversity, not the Office of Campus Climate, not the office of so many different myriad of ways that we frame the diversity discussion, not just in the 21st century, but in the 20th century, but the Office of Academic Multicultural Initiatives. It means something. When we take the word academic and not add it on as a third qualifier, but we lead with academic multicultural. We make a statement that's normative. We make a statement about how we want to express something in the world and how we want for the office to show up in the world. But to understand the Office of Academic Multicultural Initiatives, we have to go to the root, the frame, the Michigan Mandate for Diversity. It's my understanding that President James Duderstadt will be with us later today, and I wanted to say that I am a President James Duderstadt groupie. He will tell you, I have stopped him in the airport and ran down the hallway and thanked him for the vision and the leadership that he exhibited, the courage and the commitment that he exhibited in the presidential seat. It's so interesting when we think about those who sit in the presidential seat. There's risk when we do anything when you sit in a seat of leadership, but in that seat in particular, to have the courage and conviction to take a step forward, to say that we will lay a flag in the sand and we will not cower, we will not retreat, we will make this a normative part of who we are, what our values are, and what our mission is. And we will do it not simply within the context of a social justice frame, but we will be visionary and think about it in the context of this perfect storm of dynamics that is changing the world we live in. President Duderstadt was talking and writing about this with many of you around the room 30 years ago. We're talking and writing about changing demographics and educational trends. We're talking about the emergence of a global knowledge economy. We're talking about the continuing need to engage and address persistent societal inequities. City of Michigan, ground zero for all of the issues and all the educational challenges that we know exist. University of Michigan right here, nested not far away from that. How would we as a great university respond to that? What would the narrative be of diversity and excellence? And how would the University of Michigan continue to flow and evolve out of protest, out of student engagement, and out of desire to be more? The Black Action Movement 1, the Black Action Movement 2, the Black Action Movement 3, the United Coalition Against Racism, and the hopes and the dreams and the efforts of generations of students, faculty, and staff coming together, trying to engage and crystallize a moment, elevating a new moment of importance for the university. And a part of what flowed out of that was the reframing of the Office of Minority Affairs as the Office of Academic Multicultural Initiatives. Again, not just social justice, but always grounded and founded in social justice. But a question of how do we prepare the next generation of leaders, a 21st century generation of leaders, where diversity is not an afterthought or something that's just bolted on, but diversity becomes something that helps to enhance thinking and problem solving. Diversity as a part of our ability to communicate across difference, to interact with individuals who come from different perspectives, to see the world from multiple different various views. All these fundamental aspects of what it means to be a leader, fundamental to what it means to engage diversity in the 21st century. Now, OAMI, for me, was like an oasis in the desert. The man you see standing before you was not the man that I was 13 years ago. It was not the individual that I was 13 years ago. I was one of the youngest doctoral students ever admitted to the Center for the Study of Higher and Post-Secondary Education. And to hear me tell it, they kicked my butt. I was not ready for what was to come. I was not ready for the level of expectation. I was not ready for the level of competition. I was not level for the ways that subtle racism operates to marginalize and minimalize and make more difficult the process. I was not ready to be at the University of Michigan and try to navigate and move myself through these spaces. But I found my way to OAMI, and John Matlock, Jerry Gurin, the men and the women that worked there, who were my colleagues, my friends, my brothers, my sisters, were like an oasis in the desert. Not just for me, but probably that same experience could be identified to other students, graduate students and undergraduate students, who found themselves at the well of understanding, the well of support, and the well of enrichment to cultivate what this experience would mean for them. I'll never forget a conversation I was having with Jerry Gurin, senior research scientist emeritus and one of my dearest mentors in the world. I was really struggling to get through my second year qualifying paper to achieve candidacy. And I was really struggling with it, and I never forget Jerry saying, take a deep breath and write it just like you say it. He said, because you speak marvelously. He said, and if you take the time to just write it the way you say it. He said, don't get all hung up and worry about the statistics. He said, focus into the questions. He said, you can train any chimp to go out and run data. He said, the critical thing is, can you ask critical questions? Can you ask the big research questions? Because it's the burning questions that drive us, which drive our research agenda. It's the burning questions that drive us, which focus us to be difference makers and change agents in the world. OAMI helped for me to create my own personal framework for diversity and excellence. I like to refer to my practice as a scholar, an administrator, and an educator. And even though I'm not on a classic tenure track faculty line, I generally have more research dollars than most faculty, and I am far more productive as a scholar than most. Looked at through the broad lens of what it means to be a scholar. For me to be a scholar, it means to be a contributor to a discussion, to help evolve a discussion, to help be a part of something that's bigger than anything that I could hope to do in a face-to-face way, to put forward ideas that others can grapple with. I'll never forget, I was having a conversation with Sylvia Hurtado in the Center for the Study of Higher and Post-Secondary Ed, and Sylvia had offered me a job to work with her on the University of Texas at Austin Campus Climate Study, or the Texas A&M University Campus Climate Study. And it was a wonderful opportunity. And I said, well, you know, I don't think I want to do that. She looked at me and she said, well, what do you want to do with your career? I said, well, I want to write things that are meaningful and actually hopefully have people read them. I want to have the opportunity to travel around to institutions and talk about things. And most importantly, I want to work at an institution that I feel is deeply committed to issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion and change and get things done. And Sylvia looked at me, and if you know Dr. Hurtado, who's now at UCLA, she's a classic member of the faculty. She looked at me and she kind of gave me this intellectual tap on the head. And her intellectual tap on the head was in essence saying, young lad, maybe you might one day write something of any consequence, but probably not. And you too will also go forward and be an assistant professor somewhere and work your way through the ranks of tenure. And maybe, just maybe, someone might pay some attention to something you did one day and you can have a platform to talk about it. But you should probably recalibrate yourself and get on this research team. And I said respectfully, I don't think this is the space for me. And I continued to be prayerful. And shortly thereafter, John Matlock asked me to come a part of his team and help with the MLK Symposium. And it was a life-changing opportunity for me because it gave a young person who candidly wasn't ready for that level of responsibility the opportunity to lead, the opportunity to try, the opportunity to fail. And what we find is that too often those opportunities don't go to folks who have my identity characteristics. They don't go to individuals who come from where I come from in the hood. They don't go to those individuals who skew towards these issues of social justice and change. But there was vision there, and there was a sense that maybe I could be a part of something special, and maybe I could be a part of making a difference. And it was in those moments that I began to understand what my passion and potential was, that began to kind of focus this leadership approach that I use now to this day. That success comes at the intersection of having the right credentials in place, having the right relationships in place, having the right types of experiences in place, and last and definitely not least, observing the success and the failures of others. And I view this like a wheel, like a model. And what I do is I try to focus my energies in the middle. I just get it turning and turning and turning and turning. And what I found is that over time, with resilience and discipline, you get breakthrough results. And the Office of Academic Multicultural Initiatives was so important for me. It was also important because it was my first time coming from the state of Ohio, where I had really been in a different context of diversity. For me, diversity was purely a black and white dichotomy until I came to the University of Michigan and OAMI. The chance to engage and have colleagues who are as deeply passionate about issues of the Asian Pacific American community or the Native American community were transformational for me. And so seeing difference in our diversity, but yet similarities in our foundational commitment to wanting to get things done. OAMI, again, being critical to unlocking the burning questions that rested within me. Why do diversity plans fail? Why do we hear so much talk about commitment but so little action? Why is it that when we create a diversity division or a diversity role, we say we're going to ghettoize diversity, but when we create a VP for enrollment management role, we talk about we're going to strategically align our efforts? Why is it that we continue to use the same narrative over and over again, but yet end up with the same results over and over again and have presidents, provosts, deans, and others stand before us and say they want change? These were the burning questions that drove me. These are the burning questions that still drive me. These are the burning questions that activate and inspire me, and they were founded in my experience in OAMI. 2 new books coming out that are out, as Katrina talked about. These books, 1,000 pages written over the last 5 years, were driven by these questions, founded 10 years plus ago in OAMI. Jim Collins, the noted author of the book Good to Great, talks about greatness begins with who is on the bus. And I talk about the U of M Team OAMI bus. You know, and I look around now, and there's some new folks on the bus, but there's some experienced, seasoned riders on that bus too. I look and I see Jerry on that bus. I see John guiding that bus, although he's moving into his last stop. I see Gloria still backseat driving, telling everybody which way to go, left or right. I see folks like Loomis who've gone from one role into a more senior role of leadership. I see my dear sister Katrina Golden, who I think is one of the most competent people and capable women on the planet, individuals on the planet continue to grow and evolve in her role of leadership. I see folks that weren't a part of the office when I was there initially, but they're a part of the office now, like Rochelle. I see so many faces. I think back to my time with MTIES and talking about the partnership between Washtenaw Community College and the Office of Academic Multicultural Initiatives and the university, and the critical work of bridge building for those who began their experience in one sector of higher education and then moved into this very selective and elite of institutions. When I think about the greatness of our staff that I had a chance to work with, smart, committed, talented, versatile, diverse, innovative and creative, youthful and experienced, passionate, skilled, focused on excellence. One of the things I like to say now is if your staff had to compete in the all-institutional Olympics, how would they compete? If it was around project management, if it was a part of it that had something to do with research, if it was about marshaling and mobilizing your resources, if it was about having creative and marketing and positioning, how well would you do? OAMI would do damn well on most days and most years, and that goes back to the way the team was constructed. That influenced my philosophy. It also influenced my philosophy of the type of people I wanted around me and my team, whether it's the team I've led at UConn or it's the teams that I lead at the University of Wisconsin at Madison. It's important to have an innovator's DNA when you're doing this work. It becomes so important to reimagine and rethink about diversity work in the 21st century and what is it going to be about, not yesterday, but what's it going to be about today and moving forward. There's a wonderful book, The Innovator's DNA, that talks about these 5 key questions or 5 key dynamics of innovators. They are questioning of the world. They are always asking what and why and how. They're always looking to associate meaning from what they're seeing at this context with what's going on in this context. They're trying to engage others in the experience of innovation. They're experimenting with new ideas, and they're trying to take small ideas and take those small ideas and take them to a bigger level of scale.
Michigan, what's up, y'all? How y'all doing tonight? 1, 2. Yeah, we ain't got that much time, so we gonna get into it real quick. Hey. My name is Maceo from De La Soul. All right? 1, 2. And I came to hold it down with my native tongue brother, Mos Def, tonight. Word up. With his debut album, Black on Both Sides. All right?
Yeah, yeah.
So y'all know where hip-hop is going in the next millennium, right? All right?
Yo, let me say this too. This show is dedicated to Nathaniel Abraham. Free Nathaniel, free Mamiya, free the world.
1, 2.
On the real, this is for all black children everywhere. This show in particular right here.
All right?
Cause Mos Def is for the kids, man.
Yeah, baby. Yeah, baby. Yeah, baby.
Do you feel good tonight? Let me see you wave your hands up in the atmosphere. Yes. 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 Ready to live for this, yo, ready to live for captains, ready to die. Mos Def from Bed-Stuy. I got the Maceo on the 1 and 2. I represent the brand new native tongue crew. From 2000 all the way beyond. This is how we gon' get it on from the dusk to the dawn. MOSDEF 103. On my MC test without even studying. Still troubling, bubbling hot, blowing up your spot. Michigan, raise your hands in the air and let me see you keep your.
Now, when I went to John Matlock in 1999 and told him that I wanted to innovate MLK and bring hip-hop to the academy, you should have seen this man's look. He looked at me like, you want to do what? Most who? Most who's going to do what? Where? But John went on the journey with me, and he went on the conversation. And we ended up having here at the University of Michigan in 1999 one of the first hip-hop concerts on campus sponsored by an office, but critically, one of the first intellectual academic discussions of what hip hop means as a cultural text for engaging these issues in our communities. And we had a panel that was brought to life, and Mos Def was one of the members of that panel, and that night he actually performed. This is a model that I use because I talk a lot about hip-hop in the academy, and hip-hop was in the underground, but now what we see is that hip-hop over the course of the last 15 to 20 years is moving from being in the underground through student organizations to outreach and community engagement into hip-hop studies courses, majors, and hip-hop-centric scholarships and communities and initiatives. And one of the things I want to talk about is some of the dynamic work that I'm doing at the University of Wisconsin at Madison around hip-hop and around youth. One of the units in my division is the Office of Multicultural Arts Initiatives. It is the world's first hip-hop urban arts scholarship program and learning community. 15 students in each cohort receive a $100,000 academic scholarship to the University of Wisconsin at Madison. The program is 6 years old. We bring them in 15-person cohorts. We have over 70 students in the program now, and students are selected based on 3 criteria: their academic aptitude, their artistic abilities, they're poets, MCs, B-boys and B-girls, graffiti writers and DJs, and their commitment to community building and social change. Their commitment to community building and social change. When I think about my experience with the MLK Symposium, when I think about my experience introducing hip-hop, being a part of the community introducing hip-hop at the University of Michigan, and I think about how well that prepared me for what I'm doing now, the world's only hip-hop urban arts learning community. New partnerships with Russell Simmons and MC Light, a median GPA above 3.2, nearly perfect retention in the program. 95% of the first cohort graduated not in 6 years, but in 5. They are the most brilliant students we have on campus. One of them is Ralph Lauren's Next Great Poet. They headlined the Youth Olympiad in the United Kingdom. They were consultants to a new film that's coming out called From the Rough, which tells the story of the first African-American Division I golf coach. One of our very illustrious alum had invested 8 figures of his own money in this passion project around the first African-American female Division I golf coach. Invested in this movie, and then they made the movie, and they were in their editing phase, and they couldn't get distribution. A group of our students happened to be showcasing on the East Coast. One thing led to another. Next thing you know, he hires the students as an intern team to lay a culturally relevant lens over top of the movie. From that, they then articulated their recommendations. The movie was then got distribution through Lionsgate. We think about the types of things that we're doing in the 21st century and how we're engaging strategic diversity leadership. This program in particular, not just assisting with access, but also preparing students for the world. And each of our students considers themselves, and they are scholars. Another group of our students were the opening speakers at the American Sociological Association annual meeting. The biggest group and assemblage of sociologists in the world. And urban hip-hop kids got up and performed and lectured their work in front of that audience. And so again, I go back to the magic of OAMI and preparing me for this moment and moments moving forward. But the work that they're doing is not just out there, it's also on campus. We see here, unfortunately, some of the perverted imagery that we oftentimes find in predominantly white institutions. A lifelike doll hanging from the side of a building looking like strange fruit in the 21st century. Continuing perversions and images of Native American iconery in the 21st century context. Out of this, we then created a new internship. And now we're using hip-hop theater pedagogy to introduce principles of diversity, identity, and community to each and every student that comes through orientation and in other spaces. But again, innovating within the context of this work. Now, John didn't always get it right. Because one of the things I came to John with as well is I said, John, there's a member of my family member who's an artist. And he's really, really talented. But he hasn't signed a deal yet. And I'd love to bring him up here to be the opening speaker or opening performer for the MLK Symposium. His name is John Stevens. but you know him globally as John Legend. John then responded back to me, Damon, I don't know about family and nepotism and the university's pretty hard on that, and we probably need to play it straight up. Now, I think in hindsight, he'd probably go back and probably do that a little bit differently, because about 18 months later, Get Lifted came out, and Oprah Winfrey was celebrating him as her favorite artist of all time. So things changed very quickly for John, but we can't all be right all the time. But in John's message was something very important and critical to my own development as a leader in this work. John was talking about the symbols of the work. He was talking about how things may be interpreted in a way that could be dangerous for you. And I'll never forget sitting in John's office and him breaking it down for me about when you went to go see somebody else versus when somebody probably need to come see you. And what he was talking about was the institutional politics of leadership. What he was talking about is understanding and activating the theories I was learning in Marv Peterson's course on administrative governance in real world time. Talking about you need to understand the relationships. You need to understand the interest of different offices and constituents. You need to be able to move and manage and connect and engage. And for those who are really paying attention, that was what I was learning in the Office of Academic Multicultural Initiatives. I also got a sense of too often in higher ed, our efforts are much more like the cheetah and not the wolf. Now, the cheetah will sit high on the plain of the Serengeti, waiting for a diversity crisis to happen. And then the cheetah will go hurtling forward. And the cheetah is the fastest land mammal on the planet, capable of reaching top velocities at 65, 70 miles per hour, and is able to move forward, hurtling across the plain for about 300 meters. And then when it's over, whether they've accomplished their goal or not, they stop and they go, and they do what? They wait for the next opportunity to run. Too often in higher education, our efforts are cheetah-like and not by comparison wolf-like. The wolf moves collectively, collaboratively, operating as a group and a team, not just capable of moving over 300 meters, but capable of moving for 3 days relentlessly, not just in one part of the world, but you can find the wolf in nearly any part of the world. One of the things I learned is that for an institution to truly be committed, it's got to be wolf-like integrity in what we're doing. Hence taking us back to the framework of the Michigan Mandate, hence taking us back to our continuing work here at the university yet today. One of the things I like to say, we're working on a new diversity plan at Madison right now. And I'm thinking about getting some t-shirts made for all the students on campus called Got Air. That diversity plans can't live without accountability, incentives, and resources. I learned that here a long, long time ago. And how I was able to learn and master that lesson at 23, 24, and yet most institutions across the country still have yet to figure it out. Yet to figure out that if you don't put these 3 fundamental things in place, you get no framework of holding people to a standard, nor do you get any of the type of bubble up energy that's important to move a culture, particularly a post-secondary decentralized culture like we have in the academy. Also at Michigan, I was exposed to the Gratz and Gritter cases. And I made the decision to come to Michigan and study over other institutions that will go nameless, but they're pretty well-respected institutions in the great Northeast. But I made the decision to be here, and it was the best decision ever, because I didn't know that these decisions would be so important, that they would set the context for the discussion of issues of diversity in the 21st century in so many critical ways. I also didn't know that I would get a sense of what the conservative attack was in this work. Organizations like the Center for Equal Opportunity, the Center for Individual Rights, the National Academy of Scholars, the Foundation for Individual Rights in Education, and others. Organizations which have as their operative priority the dismantling, in particular, of race-conscious policy in the academy. They are active, they continue, they are relentless, they are wolf-like in their activity. Now, we see this continual erosion of where we've been, to where we are, to the question that will be decided very soon with Fisher v. University of Texas at Austin, to where we're going. Of course, here in Michigan, you've already had to cross over that line into a race neutral, if ever that could exist in any way, type of policy platform. But those of us in this great state of Wisconsin and other places are still holding on, that we can still continue to use all of the tools that we have at our disposal. But indeed, we are very fearful that we will not be able to moving forward. I like to think about myself as the Jedi in this work. And so as the Jedi, at times I will consult the wisdom of Master Yoda. And so as I was talking with Master Yoda about what was going on with respect to these organizations, he said the following: strong in the dark side is this one. Connected they are to presidential administrations past. No friends to diversity and access they were. Confusing and challenging their ideology. Tangled be the language they use. Co-opting the history. Adopting the icons of movements past. Manipulating language of equity and opportunity is their way. Shifting the discourse to meet purpose. Framing the issues. Hoodwinking the people they do. Multiple will be their attacks. Operating in the courts, politics, legislation, and media. Challenging of character they will be to those who resist. Relentless is their approach. Pitting women against minority. Wealthy against vulnerable. Educated versus citizen. Strong you must be to overcome this one. Clear you must be in your values. Powerful you must be in your intentions. Coordinated you must be in your efforts. Strategic you must be in your tactics. Proceed forward with caution. Now that was me having fun with Yoda. But it's very real. And the realness of it came to my footsteps of my door at the University of Wisconsin at Madison, September of 2011. Linda Chavez, Bill O'Reilly, pictured right there behind me. Center for Equal Opportunity put forward a report saying that the University of Wisconsin at Madison was discriminating in our admissions processes, that we were overvaluing race in our holistic admissions process. If you look at our numbers, you will see that we must not have been doing a good job of it if indeed we were doing those things, because we don't have nearly enough diversity at our university, and we're working as hard as we can to get there. They put forward these reports, and we got the reports, and we had the reports, and we sat down as a leadership team. And as a leadership team, we decided we would do a briefing for the campus community to let them know what was going on. We went out, we did the briefing using our social media feeds. 600 students showed up with some faculty and staff as well, and we talked about these reports that were going to come out. They were going to say that you were an affirmative action admit, that you were admitted to the university through invalid means, and candidly, that your presence there was based on a shoddy process, and that you were not admitted through legal means. And they did it during the first week of school in order to be as destructive and as disruptive and as attention-grabbing as possible. And so we went out and we did the briefing. I spoke for 4 minutes. Chief Student Affairs Officer spoke for another couple minutes. We did a joint Q&A for about 5 minutes, and we left. Next day, we go to the press conference. We go to the press conference. We're in the press conference, and they're up there doing their thing at the press conference, and me and a member of my team, we get up to leave the press conference because we start hearing this noise. When we arrived, there was nobody there, but when we were leaving, we heard this noise. We're more than our score. We're more than our score. We're more than our score. So we walk out the door, and it's nothing but a sea of students and community members wildly cheering. And I see one of my students, Rashid. So Rashid, whenever he sees me, he gives me a fist bump, says, "What's up, Doc?" So Rashid sees me and goes to give me a fist bump. I fist bump Rashid. What does that fist bump look like? Power to the people. Then the media machine began. The media machine began because they then wrote the press release for the DoubleTree Hotel, meaning the Center for Equal Opportunity. And the press release talked about there being a riot. Not one person injured, not one piece of property damage, not one person arrested, not one person detained. Students made their voice heard and they left. Then the media arced up bigger. And when it arced up bigger, I actually had a moment of pride. Because when the New York Post wrote the article about it, you know what they called me? A Michigan thug. They just bypassed Wisconsin. It took me all the way back to the root. They just bypassed Wisconsin, took me all the way back to the root, just called me a Michigan thug. And then Bill O'Reilly went on the attack. And he's on TV and he's calling me outside of my name. He's calling me a loon. He's calling my office 10 times, wants me to go on TV and debate him. Now, y'all can see that I don't have any problem elocuting myself, and I wouldn't have any issue debating someone in appropriate context. But a context in which you will be muted is not that context. And a context in which it's not a debate, but it becomes an ideologuing type of back and forth and attacking is nothing that I wanted to be a part of. But in the same instance, too, in the 21st century, when those things happen, then your reputation is tarnished in the digital world. Those are steps laid in concrete. And although I have accomplished some levels of success, I am early in my career trajectory. And one has to beg the question, what would be the implication of that? And I was concerned. And I called my mentors around the country, and the first thing they said is a university standing by you. First thing John said was, Damon, where's the president at? We're going down to do an interview with the media, and David Ward was spectacular. The second thing they talked about is what are we doing to get the message out about what really happened? And we were able to handle those things. But that still remained in the footprint. And I thought about going on TV and fighting back and all these things, but that was not the terrain in which you fight back. You fight back with the same thing that got you there. So I put my head down and I said I will finish all of the publications that I had set forward to do, and I pushed through. And I called 2012-13 Return of the Jedi, because I'm now back out and I'm now talking about the things, and I'm talking about the experience. The last slide that I want to present was something that's actually not associated in terms of the phraseology with the University of Michigan. It's associated with something I actually took from another of my mentors at Ohio State University, the late Frank Hale Jr., who was Vice Provost Emeritus, and he's now deceased. But one of the things that Dr. Hale used to always talk about was that commitment without currency is counterfeit. Commitment without currency is counterfeit. If there is no currency, there is no commitment. The thing that I always saw at the University of Michigan, and I pray and hope that it still is true today, is that there's always a commitment and there's always currency that follows that commitment, such that each and every one of us in the room can continue to activate and engage the work, whether we're in OAMI or one of the areas that partners with OAMI, because so much remains yet to be done. Thank you so much.
Michigan taught you well, Damon. I think it was Hemingway who once said, if you're any good, it's all your fault. So it's all my fault about John Legend. We did make it up, though, with Mos Def, because Mos Def was here about 4 years ago. And before we went in collaboration, OAMI went into collaboration with the Music Society. And we were really surprised that they approached us. And then they spent the next 3 months freaking out with their membership. And 3,000 people watched them. They were all jumping up, whether you were 30 or whether you were 60. And it was a wonderful concert, and probably one of the best concerts that's ever been given at Hill Auditorium. So we did make that part up. Let me now transition to comments by James Duderstadt. You weren't here when we did all the kudos for you, including Damon. But, you know, oftentimes students will say, how did diversity get started at Michigan? And I've already talked about students, the impact the students had in terms of getting this going. But someone had to run with the plan. Katrina and I, in presentations, do this, the Trail of Diversity model. And one of the things, you know, there's always a plan. We talk about action being taken, a plan coming out, and nothing ever being done. And then the students start to act up again in 10 years when they figured you didn't do anything that you committed to. That wasn't the case with the Michigan mandate. Dr. Duderstadt took the concerns of the students, the agreement that the university had reached with students, and he put it into a plan called the Michigan Mandate. And even that had a lot of meaning to people because they said it's his mandate, not mine. One of the most important things that he did was there's another piece to the Michigan Mandate. It was called the Michigan Mandate Strategic Linking of Diversity and Excellence. And that really played out in the court. Because diversity is signaled that the university was saying that diversity was not sitting out there by itself. And we had lots of evaluation, lots of reports. You may not remember this, but on your advisory committee, people used to always yap, well, we're not doing enough. And he says, look, presidents don't have a lot of power. But he said, I do have the power of selection. And he said, I want you to know of 35 major directors, I've replaced 28 since I've been president. And that left everybody saying, who are the other 7 left? So there were a lot of changes. Let me, and one thing that's interesting with Dr. Duderstadt, you would assume that he's coming out of social sciences. He's been an engineer all his life. He's dean of the College of Engineering before he became provost, and then he became president. He negotiated this agreement with students. Without further ado, let me bring on Dr. Duderstadt, who the students affectionately called the dude.
Happy silver anniversary. To Damon, we've sent you some Michigan help. University of Wisconsin-Madison has a new chancellor, Becky Blank. We trained her well as the dean of our school, the Ford School of Public Policy. And then we kind of put her in a cauldron as acting Secretary of Commerce. So she's all ready for Wisconsin. She can take it on. You know, in thinking about this, I suddenly realized that 25 years ago, almost exactly to this month, was the point at which I was sentenced to hard labor as president of the university. So there's a certain combination here with the launch of this program, the effort of Charles Moody, a number of African-American faculty, and in particular, as John said, strong student engagement that kind of taught us a lesson and taught us the right way. Now, we didn't have hip-hop, and I certainly didn't think of Yoda. Probably I should have. But over the last 25 years, we've had people like John Matlock and Lester Montz and many, many others build the importance of this effort. And yet this morning, I wake up and I read in AnnArbor.com that yesterday the Senate Assembly has approved a resolution calling for the university to work more strenuously to create a learning community that reflects aspirations to be a leader in a public university in our increasingly diverse 21st century society. The 4 points they put out, great concern about a decades-long lack of progress. In many areas, we're kind of back to where we were 25 years ago. To redirect university resources, to strengthen leadership, we've just heard that theme. To broaden definitions of what we mean by diversity, and to support ongoing initiatives. So in my brief comments today, I thought it might be useful for a few reminders going back 25 years ago of what we learned at that time and what we tried to do. You know, actually this commitment of the university to diversity as one of the founding principles for the institution goes back to the 19th century. It's captured best, I suppose, by the statement of James Angel that the mission of this place was to provide an uncommon education for the common man. And what they meant by that was all of society, regardless of race, working class, and so forth. It broadened to include African Americans and women in the 1860s at a time when this state was hostile to immigration. The university took great pride in the international nature of its student body. This commitment of the university to diversity and educational opportunity was not well received by the state from time to time, but fortunately the university had this unusual characteristic of constitutional autonomy, and fortunately or unfortunately it was very weakly reliant on state appropriations, which we know well today. At Michigan, we have long been convinced that the university's capacity to serve our society, our nation, and the world really depends in part on our ability to achieve and sustain a campus community recognized for its racial, its cultural, its ethnic, economic diversity. That diversity has been a cornerstone of our efforts to achieve excellence. Today, America is changing very, very rapidly. Now, to be sure, many of us are becoming older, so we're an older society. But in fact, we are losing any character of a majority ethnic population in our society. 44% of the millennial generation of our children are now minorities. And soon we will no longer have a majority ethnic population in this country. The increasing diversity of the American population with respect to race, ethnicity, gender, national origin actually is one of our greatest strengths. It gives us extraordinary vitality, the capacity to adapt to a world characterized by enormous change. But yet, it's also a situation in which there are many social and economic factors we have to continue to fight against. It seems like, as an institution, we take 2 steps forward and then 1 step back, and then we have to pick ourselves up and move it again. So for that reason, I just kind of like to remind you of a few aspects of what was launched 25 years ago to see if we can learn some lessons from this situation. We concluded then that although the university had approached the challenge of serving an increasingly diverse population with the best of intentions, it really hadn't developed or executed a plan that was capable of achieving sustainable results. In a sense, succeeding in creating a more diverse campus was really an exercise in major institutional change. It required a long-term strategic focus. Sometimes we'd have to leave behind well-accepted but reactive and uncoordinated efforts to move toward those which generally got traction. The challenge was to persuade the university community that there was a real stake for everybody in seizing the moment to chart a more diverse future. As John said, we titled the plan, the Michigan Mandate, a strategic linking of academic excellence and social diversity. The mission and goals were stated quite simply: to recognize that diversity and excellence are complementary and compelling goals for the university, and to make a firm commitment to their achievement; to commit to the recruitment, support, and success of members of historically underrepresented groups among our students, faculty, staff, and leadership; to build on our campus an environment that sought, nourished, and sustained diversity and pluralism, and that valued and respected the dignity and the worth of every individual. The strategy that was put together by a great many people was complex. It was all-pervasive. It not only involved a very considerable commitment of resources, but some innovation in many programs. By the mid-1990s, this institution could point to remarkable success. The representation of underrepresented minority students, faculty, and staff more than doubled over that period. More significantly, the success of underrepresented minorities at the university improved even more remarkable, with our graduation rates rising to the highest level among all American public universities. The faculty that we recruited achieved promotion and tenure success comparable to their majority colleagues, and there were a growing number of appointments to minorities to leadership positions in the university. When I stepped down as president, half of the executive officers of the university were of African American origin. The campus climate became not only more accepting and supportive of diversity, but students and faculty began to actually come to Michigan in part because of its reputation for a diverse campus. And perhaps most significantly of all, as the campus became more racially and ethnically diverse, the quality of its students, its faculty, and its academic programs increased to the highest level in their history. By every measure, we had been able to establish in a very convincing fashion that in today's world, diversity is intimately linked and coupled to excellence. You can't have one without the other. But of course, the story doesn't end here. In part because of our visible efforts and success in this, we became a target for those groups seeking to reverse affirmative action, with the cases filed against the university that went to the Supreme Court level. There was a certain irony in this because, as John recalls, we really never considered admissions policy as a part of the Michigan mandate. We assumed that we would admit students based on what the law would allow us to do, but in reality, the Michigan mandate was a different kind of a thing. It required engaging with communities, making the case that Michigan was an extraordinary opportunity for outstanding students and faculty, investing where we could to provide a supportive environment on our campus. The Supreme Court decisions on the Michigan cases reaffirmed those policies and practices. And in fact, we thought we'd won a battle and we could continue our progress. But of course, the state of Michigan became a victim of a series of efforts led by an Auslander, Ward Connerly, who was, as University of California Regent, responsible for Proposition 209 in that state, and a similar proposition, Proposition 2, was passed in Michigan, removing affirmative action. Over the last decade, actually it's over about the last 15 years, we've seen the impact of that on enrollments. African-American enrollments have dropped to about half what they were at that time, a much deeper drop in many of our professional schools. Underrepresented minorities have declined quite significantly. And in fact, in many ways, we've become kind of a poster child of what happens both in terms of external factors such as Proposal 2, but perhaps the changing nature of our society. The issue of the Atlantic in February that compared us with Harvard, Yale, and Stanford, which was fair enough, but University of California, Texas, and they put us kind of at the bottom of that group in measuring diversity. Beyond that, of equal concern in recent years is this commitment of the university to an uncommon education for the common man as our public purpose seems to be framed. In a recent study by the Education Trust, it actually quoted that, noting that public universities like Michigan, founded to provide an uncommon education for the common man, have drifted away from this historic mission. You measure it in a variety of different ways. Michigan's fraction of Pell Grant students have now dropped to 12 to 13%, well below that of other public universities like Michigan State at 20% or University of California at 30%. It's disturbing today that Michigan enrolls less than 6% of first-generation college students compared to 16% average by most of our peers. Rather than an uncommon education for the common man, in many ways, we seem to be redefining that in terms of an uncommon education to attract the top 1%. I'm on a major effort by the national academies to deal with this extraordinary inequity that's beginning to appear in American society about educational opportunity. And the way we put it is the following. In America today, if you're smart and poor, in the bottom quartile, you have a 1 in 10 chance to earn a college degree. If you're dumb and rich, that means you're in the top quartile, you have a 9 in 10 chance of a college degree. Once again, something to really address, and it's coupled with the diversity issue, obviously. So, a few final comments learned from the Michigan experience that after yesterday's resolution by Senate Assembly, we probably ought to bring out and remind folks of. It's important to recognize that most institutions, universities, corporations, governments, are actually biased against diversity since they tend to protect the status quo. So efforts to enhance diversity are in reality almost always exercises in fundamental institutional change. Second, achieving diversity requires active leadership from the top of an organization, engaging, listening, learning from minority communities, but beyond that, picking up the flag and leading it into battle from time to time. And third, it's important to approach diversity strategically, investing in what works and either fixing or abandoning those that fail. At Michigan, I think throughout much of our history, we remain absolutely convinced that there's a very strong linkage between academic excellence and diversity. And we've demonstrated and fought to sustain that bond. The same can be said for the dependence of our nation's prosperity and security, because without social diversity and broad representation, American life suffers greatly. We're a great multicultural nation, and we must reflect that extraordinary diversity in every aspect of our national character, in all fields. I should finally conclude by acknowledging sometimes, as a leader of an institution like this, that defending principles such as equity and social justice can be hazardous to one's health, not to mention one's career. But I should say that this is a battle that I think many of us, including most of you in this room, are quite prepared to fight once again, and I think it may be necessary once again, in spite of the likely personal toll that it takes from time to time, because there are few causes that are more clearly worth of such sacrifices. Diversity, equity, and social justice are among them. Thank you very much, John, for inviting me.